Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This here is a true story about crossing the pond at night in the world's smallest cockpit on the tanker through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly.
So there I was. 50,000 feet, nothing running but my wristwatch.
Right. Inverted at night with a total electrical failure. Know how I could tell? Air metals dangling in my face. Greetings, everybody. Yeah. Repeat and Fig here coming to you. Fig looks to be at home still, mostly hiding behind his microphone with his shiners. Don't mouth off to mama.
It's gotten, that first day was bad. That was the day that we recorded our hangout. But, after that, the pain was gone. It just looks bad. And now it just looks really bad. I got the double raccoon thing going, man. It's not good.
Yeah. That lump, though, man, looks like you could see your own forehead.
Yeah, it's pretty much gone. I can feel a little bit of a lump right here. Other than that, it's all cosmetic.
So literally landed on your face on the tailgate of your trailer, huh?
Well, let's just say yes, because there's a little more to it than that. But yeah, I'm lucky. I'm blessed because a half inch lower and it would have just shattered my nose. And
right.
I'd probably be, I have all kinds of other issues, which, hey, don't think I don't have issues. Oh, trust me, I got issues. But as far as this head injury goes, there's really nothing there. It's all cosmetic.
Right on. Well, we're doing a little bit of a different show today. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say to me, we want to know more about you guys. Deepen the connection with us as opposed to a guest every week, which some people may or may not find some of our guests interesting. I don't know about you. I find all of our guests interesting and fascinating, but
I do too.
It's just me. So yeah.
Well, I like hearing everybody's stories, man.
Yeah, exactly. So the stories, and they have been fantastic. And so I get it when we approach guests and they go, "Yeah, I got nothing. I got no stories. I got nothing to say." Yeah, actually, you do. You got a lot more to say than you realize. So there've been some amazing ones out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So looks like we got Dizzy with us this morning and Badass, and I believe Wiser, Mr. Bud over in the United Kingdom, said he was going to join us today too. So,
Outstanding.
And he actually sent in a pre-question, and we can see your comments and take questions from YouTube and Facebook and such. But his first question was. So he works as a flight instructor he says at the start of the food chain training at ab initio private pilot licenses. And when they start, I often tell them, you will remember your first solo in great detail, the same way you remember losing your virginity if you were sober.
Yeah, that's a big if.
So what is the, if you were sober, your first solo? Or losing your virginity. Asking for a friend.
I'm going to go with virginity.
Okay, there you go. All right. I wondered how well both of you remember your first solos in ab initio training, and again, on each type you flew where a two-seat trainer was not available. Why don't you tell us about your first solo, man? I'd love to hear that.
Well, first, before I talk about my first solo, I got to talk about my flight instructor, which I said sometime in the past I have, but his name was Ray Jordan, and I didn't understand at the time how absolutely blessed I was to have him as my initial flight instructor, but he was a B-24 pilot in World War II.
Okay.
And had incredible stories that I really didn't appreciate at the time.
Right.
And so, I had, he was my flight instructor, and I guess I don't remember exactly. And maybe you could help me. I think you have to have 10 hours of dual before you can be solo. At a minimum, you have to have 10
sounds
hours.
right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the same or not, but I knew I was getting close to having 10 hours, but my landings were not spectacular. They weren't consistent. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And somewhere around the 10-hour mark, it was about the 10th flight or so. I'm flying with Ray, and we weren't wearing headsets. We were in a Cessna 152, and most of the time I couldn't hear
what.
Talk real low like this. We had the radio cranked all the way up so we could hear the response, but I couldn't hear what the hell he was saying most of the time, right? And we'd flown over to Richards-Gebaur. It was a former Air Force base, and at the time it was a joint use. They had a reserve A-10 reserve unit there, but it had 10,000 feet of runway and a control tower. So we flew over there, and we were doing pattern work. And then after we landed, after we were doing touch and goes, which is kind of crazy on a 10,000 foot strip, you could do like 3 goes on a 10,000 foot strip.
Yeah.
Right? So we landed, and he said, just stop the plane right here. And I thought, okay, we're going to stop and do a rolling takeoff or something like that, because there's plenty. And he unstrapped and got out, and he goes, go around 3 times, stop and pick me up. And I went, what? And he closed the door. And then and I'm like, holy shit, this is happening. So I went around 3 times. I stopped, rolled down to where he was. He got back in and flew back to the little airport that we were based at. But I remember after I got airborne, everything was cool until I was on the downwind, and I'm over this farmer's field. It was full of cows, and I looked down and I thought, holy fuck, I'm all by myself.
Right. Whoopsie. This ain't what
Suddenly I look over to my right, and there's nobody there, and I see cows. I'm over this field. I'm like, oh shit, this just got really real.
Yeah.
I think after the initial oh shit factor, I just kind of went into muscle memory mode and did the 3 touch and goes, stopped and picked them up and took them back, and that was that.
Fantastic.
What about you? What about your first solo?
So mine was actually at a non-controlled. I learned to fly at Ryan Field. It's in Baton Rouge International, as it were. So I was going over to the working area, which is west of the field, and north of that, there's a little strip called Jackson, Louisiana. And so we were out there working our landings, and mine was rather frustrating. I got to say, I had 10, 12 hours somewhere in there, and I was doing everything really well, except the landings were not consistent. That was the thing. You just I'd get 3 or 4 really good landings, and then I'd really hork one up and go, what am I missing? So finally, once he was pretty convinced I wasn't going to rip the nose gear off and have a prop strike or stall at 10 feet above the deck, we were over at Jackson, and he goes, okay, this is it. Same thing. Got out, closed the door. And I remember going round and round the pattern, and he's down there waving to me like a madman. I'm like, oh, am I doing something wrong? But no, he's just waving, happy. So it was, it was good. That was a lot of fun. And then I actually wound up changing instructors midway. He moved on to something else. And then I got a guy who was actually the nephew of Darrell Waltrip. And he had just graduated from Louisiana Tech and was a new CFI, but signed me off to do all my private pilot check ride and all that kind of stuff, but refocused me on a whole bunch of things the other instructor hadn't given me. So I'll tell you this, and most flight schools do this, but if you're just working with one instructor, before they sign you off, have another instructor take you up.
Yeah.
Make sure, it's just a quality assurance check that you haven't overlooked something and they haven't overlooked something that may be important,
That is sage advice.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. A doctor's second opinion,
Well, yeah. Hey, and I had another Ray Jordan episode it triggered when I was talking
jealous,
about it.
Man.
So what leads up to solo is a lot of other things, and one of the things that we trained was, we were doing, turns around a point. Well, we were doing turns around this field. I had to figure out which direction the winds were coming from. They wanted me to stay over the fence line around this square farmer's pasture. And at one point, he reached up, pulled the fuel mixture to closed, and the engine quit. And he goes, "Engine quit. What are you going to do?" Well, the first thing I did was push the control back in. I'm
going to give it to the engine kind of sputtered. Guy.
Engine sputtered back to life, and he reached up, pulled the mixture back to off again, and it quit. And I started to reach for it again, and he slapped my hand, and he goes, "Engine quit. What are you going to do?" And I said, well, shit, Ray, I'm going to land in this field right here. And he goes, "Okay, show me how." So, I know what he wanted. He wanted to make sure, I knew where the wind was coming from and I could turn it into the wind. And so I did all that, right? I kind of boxed myself around and I was all set up into the wind and I knew I was going to clear the fence. And so I was waiting for him to push the the fuel mixture in. So the engine could start, because the prop was windmilling the whole time. And he didn't. And the next thing I know, we landed in this field, kind of came to a stop. And then the dust cloud kind of rolls over the airplane. And I looked over at him and he looks at me and he goes, "Well, you better get this thing started and get us out of here before the cops come." Son of a bitch, Ray.
Fantastic. So a tricycle gear, 150, 152?
Yeah. They had both. Sometimes I was in the 150 and sometimes I was in the 152. Yeah.
Gutsy move for that instructor, man. I'll tell you.
Dude, well, at the time he was probably in his mid 60s.
Okay.
This was in 1980. This was in 1985. Okay. So, I figured he was in his 20s in World War II. So 40 years later. So he had to be mid to late 60s, right?
Okay.
But he looked like he was 80, because he had lived hard.
Yeah.
And he was a no nonsense guy.
That's awesome.
Like one of the very first flights, we're flying along and there was one puffy cloud in the sky, about 3,000 feet. And we were like 3,500 feet. And he goes, "See that cloud over there?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Go towards that cloud." So we're flying and flying and flying and we're about to the cloud and I'm waiting for him to say, "Okay," to go around it. And he didn't. So I went right through it, right? Kind of bounced around a little bit, popped out the other side. He goes, "That was kind of cool, wasn't it?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Don't ever fucking do that again." I'm like, "Okay."
You just broke the rules there, Ray.
Yeah. Well,
that's fantastic.
He was driving the point home, and I guess he did.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's funny. That's funny. I'm jealous, man. I would have loved to have flown with a guy like that, and I don't recall that I ever did.
Well,
although at my airline I did, but that was different. So no kidding. Well, the other thing he asked about was any first solos in airplanes that there weren't 2-seat trainers for, and the only airplane I know of that's the case was the A-10, which we didn't fly. Did you ever fly anything else that didn't have another? Yeah.
No.
So, we talked to guys like Gallo and Sugar, Bill Spicer, and those guys, they learned to fly the Harrier with a throttle quadrant bolted to a table in the ready room.
Right.
Only a little terrifying. I mean, even if there had only been single-seat Harriers, we had the advantage of a full visual simulator to learn in.
And it was pretty darn close to the real thing.
Yeah.
That simulator was
amazing. And I don't know about you, the last time I was in that building and saw it, they had linked it up so that data link was so much better now than it was in the early 90s that they could go in the simulator and do aerial combat with the Hornets down at Beaufort and
oh shit,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Or even with the, remember there were two simulators side by side in two different rooms. Those guys could fight each other even. So yeah, all that had been improved. So that was kind of cool. But
I knew that technology had come a long way.
Yeah.
But even back when you and I were there, it was pretty good.
It's amazing.
Your buddy could shoot all kinds of surface-to-air missiles at you and AAA, and there was a MiG-23. I think I remember that the whoever was controlling the panel, which was usually one of us, could fly around, not really
Could send your way. Yeah.
could send your way, I do remember that. I thought that was pretty cool. The visuals were pretty good, probably not as good as they are these days.
Yeah, all things considered, I thought they were fantastic at the time. And the other thing they could do is you could either put it on crash override or not. So if you crashed, the screens would freeze and the screens would turn red. That's it. You're dead type thing. So, but I remember, at least as an instructor at 203, and we did it to each other for NATOPS checks and that sort of thing in the gun squadron towards the end of the ride. No one ever got a landing at the end. What'd we do? Just start.
Oh, you loaded your buddy up until he was dead.
One emergency, another
after
emergency,
after another. Well, you
Until
can
he had
handle
no
that
choice,
fine.
but-
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
had no choice. Pull the damn handle and get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm trying to think. I don't remember. I remember my first solo in the T-34 in flight school. So I was down in Corpus.
What do you remember about that? Because I got vague memories of that.
It's pretty vague. I remember doing it. I remember what runway we were on and that sort of thing. But thought, this is pretty cool. It's the hottest airplane I'd ever flown in my life.
Yeah,
and
same.
Learning to fly in a T-34 Charlie, a turboprop with a PT-6. That was a whole lot of airplane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was cool. No, I remember I had good landings. I got good grades for it and everything. And I remember which runway and that kind of thing. It was a nice day. That's about it that I remember from it. But what's weird is I don't remember my first solo in the T2, the A4, or the Harrier.
Yeah, I don't recall my first solo in the A4, but I do remember feeling in the T2. I do remember remembering how awesome it was to be in a jet by myself. And in that airplane, the cockpit, the forward cockpit was so far forward that if you just looked left and right, you didn't see anything. You had to look a little further to see the wing tips that were just back a little bit. And that's the first airplane I'd ever flown where the wings weren't right underneath me,
right?
Or right above my head,
right?
And it was smooth. Smooth, no vibrations,
Right. So jets are nice like that, I'd buy one, but I don't have an extra $3 million just for the engine,
Is that all that is?
Yeah.
We should get a couple.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm just thinking almost any jet aircraft. Although I guess some of the used Lears and stuff are down in the 1.5 million range, but oh my God, the maintenance and the fuel.
No. So let me ask you this: you don't remember the first solo in the Harrier, and I really don't either. But I do remember that probably the first 50 vertical landings I ever did, my sphincter was clenched so tight, going from translating from forward flight to vertical, to stopping in the air and doing it took me probably a solid 50 landings before I was like, okay, I can relax.
This is normal. Yeah. I can handle this. So
did you have that same feeling? Or
I did.
Like normal? Was it more natural? It wasn't natural for me.
No, it really wasn't. In fact, I remember my first ride in the T-Bird was in the back seat with Tim Shea, who was the British exchange pilot.
Okay. And he the living shit out of that airplane too.
Oh, he did. He knew how to make that airplane sing. And we came in for the vertical landing. And well, intellectually, I knew that this airplane could do it as we're slowing down and getting slower and slower. And I'm watching the airspeed creep down 50 knots, 40 knots, 30 knots. And I'm kind of looking, I truly looked out to each wing and going, it seems like there ought to be, piano wires or something holding us up here. This is just not normal. And again, intellectually, I knew that wasn't the case, but I'm still looking at the wingtips going, we really are down to zero airspeed here. And then he did a pedal turn. And then, of course, he put it in the braking stop, which was, bow of the airplane. And, he hovered there for, I don't know, 10, 12 seconds and then put it back. But it was like, oh, my God. And you have a face full of dirt. What was it, 8 or 9 degrees nose down?
Yeah,
Something like
I
that.
think 8.5 degrees is what the nozzles, they would go 98.5 degrees. So
Yeah.
8.5 degrees nose down, right? If you're staying in one spot.
Yeah. That is a face full of dirt.
Yeah, it is.
I was like, oh my God, I can't believe. And yeah, he's like, yeah, you could do this all day long. And don't be afraid of it. And he also, was clear on always respect it. Don't be afraid of it, but always respect it, because this airplane will reach out and
It'd bite you
bite
if
you.
you were not paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. As all airplanes will, but obviously the Harrier had its special considerations, and you didn't have a smart left hand. We talked about that briefly during the hangout, that you didn't need to move your hand back and forth between the throttle and the nozzle lever in the OV or the MV-22.
I did not know that until we had the
Didn't
hangout.
either.
I thought there was a collective in there and extra controls. I thought it was like a circus.
Yeah.
But no, it's shit. I mean, it sounds like you and I could probably sit down in it and do it.
Woohoo. Let's go. I'll do the simulator today.
Not that that's a good idea. I'm not, don't get me
Right.
wrong. I'm not advocating that.
Yeah, there's so many laws of aerodynamics that are being violated there, it seems. It just...
All right. I have another question for you. And
Yeah.
You triggered this. So my first flight actually in the Harrier was in the backseat of the T-Bird, just because, there was an empty seat and they said, hey, you want to go? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. And it was with Bear. Remember Bear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bear.
And so he was leading 3 solos out to the range. And then when we came back, we beat up the pattern.
Yep.
It did frighten me, because he came in really fast to the pad, because he had 3 solos coming behind him and he needed to get off the pad and then be their supervisor while they landed, right? So he was pretty aggressive. And of course, it was my first time. And just like you said, when we started slowing down and he had the nose honked way up in the air, doing some pretty aggressive deceleration shit. And I remember gripping the sides of the canopy thinking, we're going to start falling out of the sky, which of course we never did. But what I remember, and what my question for you is when we were sitting in the hot pits, because we always went through the hot pits, filled up, and then parked the plane with full tanks. The crew chief was standing there next to the plane, and he kept looking at me in the back. And so Running was saying, hey, hold up one finger. And then I would. And then he goes, now hold up 2 fingers. And I don't remember what that meant something. But do you remember what it meant? The 1 and the 2 finger signal to the.
I don't remember the specific signal. I seem to remember we used to tell him how many thousands of pounds we wanted. 2.5 or something like that. But
so he was obviously fucking with the kid, the crew chief, and he was using me as the crew
chief. Probably assumed you were the instructor.
Yes, he was using me as the tool, and I don't know. He goes, okay now, because the kid would get a real confused look on his face. He goes, okay, now hold up 2 fingers. So I would, and then I could see him laughing. He goes, okay, now hold up 1 finger. Now hold up 2 fingers, and so I didn't remember what it meant. I think it meant something, but I really don't. I was going to ask you if you remembered, because you spent a lot more time.
I didn't remember if it had anything to do with whether we filled our drop tanks or not, but I don't think we had drops on the T-Birds. So
I don't think so. I don't remember any, but my memory's not so good.
Right. I do, but thinking of other first flights, I think I've told this before. I don't remember for sure, but I remember my first bombing run in bombing sortie in
A4s?
No, in Harriers. Oh, in A4s, that was terrible. It was like, I swear to God, the same crew chiefs that went out and bent the fins on Tammy Joe's instructor's bombs.
Oh, the bombs?
Did the same thing to me when I was in flight school and out at El Centro. I couldn't hit the same freaking county with my bombs in flight school. I sucked at bombing. And then got to the Harrier, and of course our first bombs had to be iron sight. They wouldn't let us use the CCIP and all that stuff. The ARBs, none of that stuff. You just had to do it just like you did it in flight school. And my first hit was 3 feet at 1 o'clock or whatever. It's like, boom, that's how you do it, man.
And you drop the mic and walk away.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I've graduated bombing. I'm done with this. Let's go home. But I don't even think I got a hit like that ever again with constantly computed impact point. So, That was
Listen,
fantastic.
you know, you got to be really fucked up not to get a bullseye with CCIP.
Right?
Constant computed impact point.
Yeah, you're within 10 feet with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. And then, it might have been Bear that showed me. I forget with whom I was flying, but I was a student in the back seat, and we were out doing lofts. You remember that? You'd run in at 500 feet and 480 knots, and then you'd get this little cue in your HUD that would tell you to start. You would hold down the pickle button and pull up. And when the timing was right, the computer would let the bomb go in a loft, and it would loft the bomb in this huge arc, and it let go of it several miles away from the target.
It was like a special weapons delivery. Right?
Yeah. But then, as soon as you heard the tone, you could unload and roll inverted and fly formation.
Yes. And I did. And it was all awesome. And I wish so much, I had some, the technology wasn't there. But can you imagine having a GoPro or something mounted on your helmet, and you could see, because that's a hell of a story. And if if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes and done it,
I wouldn't believe it.
I would have think you're full of shit. I'm like, no way, you can't fly a formation on a bomb you just dropped. Bullshit. Is it smart? No, but can you do it? Yes.
Yeah, it was okay because now realize that we were using 25-pound Mark 76s. These things basically had a shotgun charge in them that made a bunch of smoke, so you could see where the target hit was. Now, I wouldn't probably do that on a high explosive bomb, just in case fused and went.
Yeah, that'd be,
that would ruin your day.
That's one of the Darwin's natural selection tricks right there.
Yeah. Although we did have a guy in the squadron in 223. Was he in 223 with us who shot himself? He had shot himself in an A4.
Yeah.
Because
I do recall that. Who the hell was that? Well, maybe we shouldn't say his name.
Yeah. Because
protect his,
I think I know who it was, but
ego.
Yeah, I think he'd been in A4 and he was doing a strafing run and he pulled off straight, and without jinking left or right, he got out ahead of his rounds.
Came back,
ricocheted off and shot him in the belly.
Hey, I want to circle back to the bombing thing.
Yeah.
Do you, because I know it was traumatic, and having gone back and then been an instructor in the advanced stages and taught bombing, I know firsthand, because I remember how traumatic it was. Do you remember, the first time you hurled yourself at the ground and didn't, automatically pull up like you were in a loop, but, also on a bombing run, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you remember how traumatic that was?
Yeah. And I also remember, we talk about it more with rockets than not, because you just want to watch those rockets. They look so cool. Yeah. And so you want to follow those damn things down. Yeah, that was different. And especially now, again, a 10-degree angle bombing run, that looks pretty steep. But 30 and 60-degree bombing runs, oh my God.
Yeah. All you see is the earth.
Yeah.
And since the beginning of flight training, we never kept our nose pointed at the ground, ever.
Yeah.
Well, when you go drop a bomb, that's exactly what you do. You point your nose at the ground and you leave it there until you get to a predetermined altitude and airspeed. And a lot of times it's, in the A4, just the 30-degree pattern, you were not hitting the pickle button until about 3,000 feet, right? AGL.
Yeah.
And you're doing 450, 480. And so by the time you pickle, wait half a second,
pause and pull,
and then start putting on the 4 to 5G pull, you bottom out around 1,500 feet.
Yeah, which is low at that speed when you're
still
heading down.
So being at the other end of that, sitting in the back seat, taking out new students on their first bombing run, I learned real quick that I had to keep my hands up, cupped on around the stick. It was the G limiter.
Yeah.
Because the very first time I didn't have it, and the natural reaction was, oh my God, I'm going to die, snatch on all that G and over G the plane, which we did. About 9G.
Such a thing.
Yeah, about a 9G spike before I got my hands on it. And so from then on out, I always kept on the very first bombing run, I always kept my hand there as a stop, because everybody was the same. It was the ground rush It was like, oh my God, I'm going to die, and start pulling real hard, real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to that guarding the controls here in just a second, but I just want to note that Badass says that there are 4 of course, there's only 223 Harriers. They're the last Marine attack squadron in the world. There's a flight of 4 is at Tampa getting ready to do the flyover, including the highly decorated CO bird. I guess they're going to do the NFL flyover.
Oh, no shit.
For the show today. Yeah. So
Well,
they probably
probably,
won't show it on TV. Damn it.
Yeah, I know.
But I bet that video will hit YouTube sometime later today. That'd be
That's
cool.
pretty badass. That's
So-
pretty badass.
Yeah. So we'll look for that. But yeah, so you did a good bit of time in A4s and the T-45 instructing. You do it now in your airplane.
Yeah.
And so my daughter was working on her CFI all summer. We had her on a few shows back. And one of the things that I've always done, going back to my instructor days, is guard the controls. And boy, it really offended my daughter at one point. And first of all, I had to say to her, look, I'm not your instructor, but I am your father. I'm not going to let you hurt me or you, and I'm not going to let you break the airplane. And so, I just nudged the controls a little bit. She got offended by that. And you got to have thick skin about that sort of thing. I said, I've had guys sitting in my right seat with 4 times the amount of time in the airplane that I have, 777, MD-11, what have you. And you can bet your ass I guarded the controls, particularly on landing. That's her time. Now, you aren't doing it the whole flight, but when you're in a critical environment, yeah, you're guarding the controls. So you don't get a tail strike, so you don't have any kind of issues.
Right.
You ever get any pushback for guarding the controls?
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Good. Yeah. And oh, by the way, I expect my first officers to guard the controls when I'm flying.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the brief, especially when I'm training. It's mostly new first officers, is like, hey, if you feel me on the controls, if you feel something on the controls, it's probably me. You keep flying, unless I say I've got the jet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't want to be that guy who lets somebody else break the airplane.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's the only reason.
And I would tell my first officers that. I said, if be aware. And we had one years ago, and the captain got sideways with the FAA, and the first officer basically, saved that airplane that day. And it turned out, thank goodness, that the FAA stepped in and said something, because it turned out the guy had a health issue that was caught, and it saved his life. And I can't be any more specific about that, just for, privacy reasons and everything else. But the fact is, everybody at the controls is just as responsible to keep from breaking that airplane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I never mind. I always tell first officers, don't let me hurt us. I'm going to guard the controls, and I expect you to do the same. Don't let me hurt us. And I'd rather have a guy go around, and start pushing up the throttles even before I do. And you know what? Come around, do another landing. We'll talk about it in the debrief.
Speaking of go-arounds, that's a good segue.
Yeah.
So at the airlines, at the major leagues, so to speak,
Yeah.
we stress flying long, boring, stable approaches.
Yep.
And believe it or not,
And still screwed up.
it's still screwed up on a daily basis. And when you said something about go around, that's what triggered this. We have a horrible percentage of unstable approaches, which are caught by data recorders.
Yep.
Flight data recorders.
Yeah.
When certain
FOQA
parameters are
program.
exceeded. Yeah, FOQA. What's that stand for, Pete? FOQA.
Flight Ops Quality Assurance.
Yes. And when you get outside certain parameters, like certain rates of descent, certain airspeeds, meaning if your target airspeed is this, if you're more than this knots over or this many knots less, it takes a snapshot of it. Same with rate of descent, same with above or below the glide path type thing. And it measures not landing distance, but how long you were basically in the flare.
Oh, right.
So,
yeah,
which they can calculate in it. So we have an enormous amount of unstable approaches that become unstable that don't go around. And there's some psychology behind that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, here's the thing. We had the same thing going on, and I think it's much better. And it's been some time since I've looked at the statistics on this, but I know there was a huge emphasis at my airline of making it as common to go around from an unstable approach as it was to reject a takeoff if you had any kind of light before 80 knots, or if it was, fire, wind shear, anything like that between 80 knots and your V1 speed. So that went a long way to reducing the number of no go around approaches that should have been go around approaches.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, we lovingly called the simulators for, I want to say, probably the 2 or 3 years when you went to recurrent training, we would call the end of recurrent training death by go around. Because,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the few real world go arounds that I ever did before we started doing that were absolute clusterfucks. There's no better way to say it. It was because you're in the mode of landing, and now you're pointing the airplane to the sky, and you got gear down and flaps in the breeze, and you aren't thinking, okay, I'm in the after takeoff mode. You just aren't thinking that if you haven't done it a lot before. And so they put a lot of emphasis on, okay. In fact, I remember the litany was go around, flaps 20, positive rate, gear up, set an arm, miss approach altitude, check top bug. It's like, okay, well, if you didn't say that before you bottomed out in the early days there, it was like you didn't do your litany.
Yeah.
Why would I call go around, positive rate, gear up before we've even stopped descending? But you couldn't get that. You had to get the litany out. But that led to that whole goat rope that you found yourself in afterwards. You spewed all that shit out. Now you haven't done anything, but you get your nose up, and that gets ugly. And the death by go around was stop saying it, say go around. And at that point, you push the power up and
start flying the jet, right?
Yeah,
fly the
freaking airplane. Then when you see positive rate, call for the gear up and your flaps to 20 or 5 or whatever your flap setting needed to be. And this is a slow, methodical, very procedurally oriented, and death by go around, I think, has made the airline substantially safer than it was before.
I don't know how good it not.
Right?
Because let's talk about what are the threats with unstable approaches?
Well, aside from totally horking up the landing, right? I mean, that's the main thing. You're looking at either overrun or bounced landing, leading to porpoising and start collapsing the gear and all manner of things. It just, and it isn't always, the pilot's fault. We're trying to be long and slow and straight in and that sort of thing. And our buddies over at ATC every now and then will give us what we call the slam dunk,
Yeah. Talk about that. What's a slam dunk?
Yeah. Well, you're high and fast and you need to be coming down. The glide slope's below you. You've been told to keep your speed up, that sort of thing. And you need to know, hey, I need you to maintain, 200 to the marker. Sorry, man. The best I can give you is 180. And at 5 miles out. Yeah. And what's the number one word that most pilots hate to say, but need to know that it's in their pocket?
Yeah. Unable.
Right. We're goal oriented, mission oriented, task accomplishing oriented people,
which is part of the psychology of the go around.
Yeah.
I can do this. Okay. Yeah. I'm 30 knots fast. I know I'm going to land, halfway down the runway, but I could get it on the runway. I
got 10,000 feet. I'm in plenty of room.
Yeah. And I'm going to be on time. I don't want to be late. Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm I'm mission oriented. It's not. So these are all part of the psychology piece of it that we don't want to be that guy. But when really you need to be that guy. Hey, you know what?
Exactly.
No fault of my own, or maybe it's all my fault. Doesn't matter. We're going to go around. We're going to come back and we're going to set this up right.
Yep.
And that's hard. It's hard.
It is hard. And it takes a solid commitment by airline management as well to go, we'd rather you go around. We really do. We don't want you to try and save an unstable approach. And when that message started coming from management, it was, oh, okay. And things got better. Do some guys still land out of unstable approaches? Yeah.
Yeah,
Some are unrecognizable. In fairness, if your limit is 5 knots below V1 or below your reference speed, and you briefly touch 6 knots because of gusty conditions or something, guys may not even recognize that. And it still reports you to FOQA. And oh, by the way, that's the other cool thing is FOQA and ASAP are 2 safety programs that are in place now. That when you get that call from a FOQA guy, in fact, I got one for, why did you go around? You were stable. Why did you go around? It's like, tower called us and said, the airplane in front of us wasn't going to get off the runway. And they can't see that. They're like, you were in a perfectly stable approach. Why'd you go around so low? So we had a tower called to go around. So, but if you get a call from that FOQA guy, it's not punitive. It's like, we see the data here and we don't understand. And in his case, it was, we don't understand why you went around it, but what are we missing? And that's all they're looking for is answers, because there are guys who sit there and crunch that data and try to put it all into categories. How many of these guys went around because they weren't configured until it was too late? How many guys went around because their airspeed was off glide slope, off the localizer, that sort of thing. So they're not calling to go, hey, we're management and we're looking at you. And why did you screw up? They're not. They're trying to figure out the data so that they can fix the system. Right. That's the beauty of FOQA. It's data driven to go, oh, we've got a problem at this airport. They're always unstable on the westerly runway at this airport. Why? Oh, well, maybe your altitude for your marker is too high or whatever.
Yeah. Or controllers are saying, hey, I need you to be at this speed until you get to this point. And physics takes over. And sometimes you can't physically get it slowed down and stable.
No.
By the time you get down to, 500 feet. And generally, we have gates, windows that we're aiming for to be a certain stabilization criteria, right? 1,500 feet, 1,000 feet, 500 feet. And the 500 foot for us, I don't know, I probably standard, but the 500 foot window is, if you're not stable by then, it's a automatic go around. Well, what happens if you're stable there, but then you get below 500 and then you don't, something happens. That's where we seem to run into issues a lot.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, and that's the other thing, one of the things, we wanted to talk about was the difference between flying military and flying for the airlines. I don't think I ever heard of a stabilized approach.
Are you shitting me? No. Well, no. Who would have told you who would have called you for the go around?
Right. Exactly.
If you're single seat, I'm like, I'm hacking this. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Even if it's ugly, I'm hacking this until you're not hacking it anymore. I don't recall ever sending myself around.
I'm sure I did, but it was for, a fouled runway in front of me or something along those lines. It wasn't because I wasn't hacking it. Because what's the saying in military aviation, right? It's better to look good and die than live and look stupid.
Yeah.
And if you're going around, you're looking stupid.
Yes. and I have 2 separate things burned into my memory where I should have gone around and didn't and tried to hack it. I lived through it, but it was ugly. And I said to myself, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, but now that you mention it, I know for a fact I had the day I came out of the sky at Kunsan trying to do an RVL. And I bounced and showed plan for him to everybody in ops. They were like, holy shit, we expected you to eject. And for whatever reason, my airplane went up, did about an 80-degree left angle of bank, and came right back down square on all the wheels. And I shouldn't have. I was at idle because as soon as I hit, I was at idle, but I was coming down so hard and fast, it bounced. And I didn't have any aerodynamics. I didn't have any RCS. It was just whatever righted that airplane. I have no idea to this day. It was a miracle. So
I wasn't in Kunsan, so I don't know this story.
Yeah. No, it was a foggy day in Kunsan, and but it was visibility was good enough to see planform on my jet from ops.
Wow.
And I was the last guy in, and I should have gone around. When the airplane started coming out of the sky like a brick shit house, I should have just had the power in the corner and, let it do its bouncy thing, but kept the power up so I would maintain controls. and set my attitude and get out of there. So, and that's the other thing I see, thinking of setting the attitude. I'm shocked at how that isn't drilled into you from day one. I don't remember when, but I know it was probably into my airline career before setting the attitude in a bad situation and holding it no matter what was the key to save your life, which kind of blows my mind. Do you remember getting this, that on the go around, the bounce landing, any of that? Set your attitude. In other words, don't let it porpoise. I don't ever remember getting that training.
So was that MD-11 thing?
Yeah.
Because I know that airplane had a
that was a
reputation.
varsity airplane every time you landed it. It really is.
So what? To tell us why? Because I've never flown it.
Well, there's a couple things going on. First of all, remember the MD-11 is much like the DC-10. It was the 90s version 2-man cockpit of the DC-10, and it had a much smaller horizontal stabilizer, which was more easily blanked out by full flaps landing and that sort of thing. But it had a couple other things going for it that would fool you, as it were. If you touched down in that airplane and bounced the landing, well, let me back up a little bit. As you got in close, if you tried to use nose attitude, in other words, you're getting in close, you're coming down fast, if you tried to rotate by pulling the nose up to slow your rate of descent, what you were essentially doing, remember, your main gear on that airplane is behind the pitch rotational axis of the airplane.
Yeah.
So you are actually driving your landing gear faster to the deck by pulling the nose up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you're in close, you've just increased the rate of descent of your gear. Even if you're slowing the rate of descent of the airplane, you've increased the rate of descent of the gear. And the other thing that the airplane would then do is if you hit and bounced, you've now got this airplane vibrating, and it's like, it feels like the airplane's rolling down the runway. And
even though you're airborne,
because as your main gear comes up, now the rotation has moved forward, and it's like kind of rotating around the cockpit. So the airplane's coming up in the air, but the cockpit's not moving.
Yeah. So you're still in the same spot.
You're in the same spot, but the rest of the airplane has come up several feet up in the air, and then it would come down, and it was easy to get into a porpoise in that airplane. And that's where we first got into, hey, set your attitude. Don't, get 5 to 7 degrees nose up, and don't let anything, if nothing else in the world, don't let yourself get away from that 5 to 7 degrees nose up to avoid porpoising the airplane. Get your power coming up to start flying away from the ground. And if you bounce once or twice, that's fine. Just don't let that nose gear land first, or you're in a shit sandwich. So,
and that's that led to hull loss.
Yeah,
a
couple of them actually.
Several. One of them was
China lost one. We lost two, and so it was a varsity airplane, and it was figured out. It was a really smart guy. It retired many years ago. Was the first one to come back to him with the aerodynamics and go, here's how you need to land this airplane. Things start going to crap on you. You need to use power to slow your rate of descent.
Yeah.
Not pitch attitude. You start screwing with your pitch attitude in close, and you're just compounding your problems. And so that made it much, much better, far safer after that. We learned some hard lessons. But
did you guys have angle of attack in that airplane? Angle of attack?
Not until we got the HUD.
Okay. And the HUD had angle of attack?
Yeah. Yeah. Because what blows my mind? Here's the thing. This is proof that the Air Force got to the drawing board before the Navy did when it came to airliners.
Yeah.
Especially in the older airliners, what are you doing? You're setting these little plastic bugs on your airspeed indicator based on the weight of the airplane. Because the airplane varies in weight by many tens of thousands of pounds over the course of a flight. And so you have to change the speeds you need to be flying at. Had the Navy gotten to the drawing board, we'd have used angle of attack instead of airspeed, and we'd have flown one angle of attack, whether we weighed 700,000 pounds or 300,000 pounds.
Right. Right. Thank you.
I
know. It's very frustrating. And if you had an angle of attack gauge, it would take unreliable airspeed scenarios completely out of the picture.
Yep. Yeah.
As long as you had good angle of attack, you could fly the jet all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and that's truly a lifesaver there. But yeah, that's why I have to laugh. I don't remember unstable approaches or. But the other thing is, I don't remember setting the attitude. We must have covered it somehow or some way in the Harrier things. We covered so many other things you never to do in that airplane at your own peril. We've talked about the death equation before and all that sort of thing, so you don't get an adverse yaw departure and those sorts of things. But I don't remember the attitude being the primary. And oddly enough, that's the same thing in my little Grumman Tiger. Same thing. That airplane will start porpoising in a heartbeat if you screw up the landing. And I have seen Cessnas do it too. So set your attitude.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Well, you touched on it a minute ago, and we started talking about this particular issue, but the difference, going military to airline flying. What was your biggest surprise or your biggest shock? I guess.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you. You weren't a flight engineer when you got hired, were you?
No, I went straight to the right seat of the 737-200.
Yeah. Holy shit. Talk about steam gauges and all that. And
turbojet engines, baby.
Yeah. Oh, man. But working your ass off to fly, an NDB approach and shit like that. That's crazy.
Oh,
yeah. I had the luxury of becoming a flight engineer on the DC-10 when I got hired at the airlines. And what that allowed me is the ability to sit in the smart seat, and we call it. And you, as an instructor at your airline, know what the smart seat is. You sit in the simulator in the seat behind and between the two pilots, and you watch every mistake they make, and you're just going, oh my God.
Right.
You can't possibly not see this.
I know.
You're sitting back, you can see everything. They're up and they can't see the forest for the trees. And so the same thing. I got to sit in the smart seat for 3 years at my airline and watch good captains and bad captains and good FOs and bad FOs and learn how to get things done. And oh, I want to be like that guy. I don't want to be like this guy. That sort of thing. So
that was a blessing.
That made my transition super easy, relatively speaking. By the time I got to a window seat up front, I had already had 3 years of watching how it was done, and that helped my transition a lot. The thing is, airlines have what's called an FOM, a Flight Operations Manual, which in addition to the federal aviation regulations and the flight manual for the technical manual for the airplane and all that, and all the procedures on how to fly the airplane, it has all the other things you can and can't do with regards to approaches and, who can fly and what visibility is required and what approaches you can even start and what approaches you can start but not finish and all that shit. That was the hardest thing. That it was
right.
Like, oh man, there's all these extra rules that I'm sure you got to go by going to the C-130.
Oh yeah.
You experienced similar.
Very Air Force-esque, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that's a fact.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was, I would say the hardest habit for me to break, even after watching it for 3 years, was not to do shit myself. In other words,
right.
I'm flying the airplane. It's time for a heading change, not to reach up and dial in the new heading and
right.
give myself the bug, telling the other guy, set heading 350.
Right. That was really hard too.
Yeah. As a single seat pilot, you did all that shit for yourself. And so it's
everything.
Like, oh, how hard is that? Yeah.
You're talking, you're flying, you're turning you're touching everything. And then suddenly
and now you're not allowed
to. You're in a crew airplane,
Yeah.
and our standard operating procedure sounds a lot like yours. When you're flying the airplane, you are flying the airplane, and that is it.
Yep, exactly.
Somebody else is talking. Somebody else is touching all the buttons.
Yep. And early on, it wasn't. It's since changed. Is the triple verification set 350? Guy goes up. I'm setting 350, and you have to go 350 is set.
Right.
So. Yeah, I mean, all this extra talking, it's like, oh, come on.
A lot.
I'm looking at it. It's good, So it's just a different culture is what it boils down to. But I get it. When there's that much at stake with several 100,000 pounds of airplane and many lives, yeah, it's okay. Go ahead and triple check. because we still get it wrong.
Yes, which is, well, it's a fact. And think about it. We're not flying 45 minutes at a time, or an hour at a time. Sometimes you're going 11 and a half or 12 and a half hours.
Yeah.
And
my longest flight is 15:45. I mean,
you feel like you've been sucked through a straw.
Yep.
And maybe, there's some cobwebs going on. You're fighting some fatigue. So
right? Or you just woke up from your rest break, 45 minutes prior to top of descent, but you're still sitting there 45 minutes later hoping that the caffeine's going to kick in before you start downhill. And you just realize, I haven't even done my briefing yet. Crap.
So suddenly these procedures that we put in place where you're verbalizing, you're verifying, somebody's monitoring what you're doing, what you said. So hopefully it's, it catches these mistakes, which is why we do it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? One of my biggest shocks was the weather that you would fly in.
Right. Yeah. Now that you mention it. Yeah.
When you're sitting in the ready room and it's raining cats and dogs,
it walks off,
foggy,
you're not going,
and you're like, "Yep, we ain't going."
No,
but
no need, no lives at stake, no need.
When you're at the airline and you're keeping a schedule, you're going. You may not land where you are planning to land, but you're going. So that was a big shocker.
We had a saying early on. If you're looking at the weather and think you're not going, you haven't read the flight ops manual far enough to find the proper exemption. It allows you to go.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, we were a Cat 3 airline. We land in 00. And,
same.
Yeah. So
my very first experience with that was an eye opener. I mean, we touched down in the snow, in a snowstorm on a snowy runway where everything was white. And I'm still thinking, I don't know what the captain saw. I didn't see shit.
Yeah.
When we got to the decision altitude and I said decision altitude, he said landing. And for the first time I looked out and there was nothing there but white.
A sea of white.
Yeah. I clinched waiting for the impact and, we landed, started rolling out. I still didn't know where we were.
Yeah. So, and the airplanes aren't magic. They'll land themselves and bring it to a stop right on center line if you let them. So, assuming everything's working.
Dizzy's got his asking what our opinions of a hands-off landing are, meaning an auto land.
Yeah. So on a clear and sunny day, watching the airplane do that is fascinating. Like you said, it's 100 feet overcast and a quarter-mile visibility, eighth of a mile visibility. You're clenched up, man. I don't care what anybody says. You are like, all the gauges say we are spot on. We're right where we need to be, but you're still just going. That's a whole lot of trust, man. There's
a like 1 or 2 seconds towards the end where you're looking out the cat. So for our unanointed listeners, the first officer is heads down. He's watching all the instruments, and the captain is heads out. He's looking for the approach lights, the runway environment. And when you get down to the decision altitude, which is 50 feet on a Category 3 approach, the first officer says, or the airplane announces for you, decision altitude or minimums, depending on the system. Yeah. And at that point, the captain either says, we're landing or we're going around.
Yep.
Based on this. Now, that's a Cat 3. Let's see. Our airplane doesn't have all 3 axis certified. So we have to make a decision at 50 feet. I'm guessing because it seems like when I was on the triple, we
were not sea to land at.
Yeah, that's the same way with the triple.
In the triple, the airplane would land itself.
Yep. Well,
nice if you could see
the 737 lands itself, but you got to make sure and I've done enough of these because we always try to do one with new captains in most of the time, 100% of the time it's in VFR conditions. Airplane does a pretty darn good job. Every once in a while, you'll get one that lands 7 or 8 feet right or left center line. And you're like, okay, that's probably not good. Yeah. But most of the time it's really good. It does better landings than most of the FOs.
Yep. Absolutely. And then in our HUD, we have EFIS, so Enhanced Flight Vision System, which is basically infrared. So we can see better there. But then that adds a whole new other aspect of, that you can't just land looking at EFIS lights only. You have to be able to see. And so we do that training in the simulator. There's several different ways of doing it, meaning looking around the HUD to see, do I see lights? Or clicking your EFIS on and off to turn it off briefly to go, okay, yeah, I do in fact still see lights, below a certain altitude to go ahead and continue. But that has made life so much nicer because you can actually see the runway paint and that with EFIS, and it gives you a nice warm and fuzzy that you're in good shape and you're where you want to be. So, and then you put in there, you wanted to talk about the positives and negatives. The negatives are, well, we kind of already talked about. You lose so much independence, so much control over your own, you have to talk about everything.
You got to talk about your feelings.
Yeah, that's right. And you was in a single seat jet. You just didn't, man. You did it. And a good lead, again, you could screw that up too, but a good flight lead, could make sure his wing would hang on so that he wouldn't lose him in the goo, among other things. But yeah, you feel like you lost a lot of independence, which, it's okay because, some of the guys I flew with, they don't need to be independent operators.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure they felt the same about me, but that's okay.
And, one of the more negative aspects of making the transition I found is, and you got to work at this, but you lose the camaraderie.
Right.
Of like, when you're in a squadron, when you're done flying for the day, hell, everybody hangs out. Usually you hang out for a little bit, or you always have plans and hang out.
Your team and mission oriented for other things you need to do too. Yeah.
But at the airline, man, it's kind of rare.
We call them slam clickers.
Slam clickers. That's you get to the hotel, all you hear is a slam click, and you don't see him again until the next day. I don't do that, and to the maximum extent possible, won't allow whoever I'm flying with to do that. I just say things like, hey, I'm going to be down the lobby in 15 minutes. I'll see you then. We're going out. Going to have dinner. Going to do this. Going to do that. But, I don't want to stay in the hotel room.
Right. No, it's miserable. That's what was so miserable about COVID, is having to stay in the damn hotel room. So, and I think that kind of brought back a lot of slam click culture that wasn't there previously, which is too bad. But yeah, so that's different. Yeah, you just aren't as tight as you would otherwise be with friends in the squadron and that sort of thing. So,
and then
you got something down here. Go ahead.
Oh, and then at the end of a trip, you set the parking brake, you run the parking checklist, and then you go throw the keys at the back of the jet. See ya, and you're gone.
Yeah. You got anything for me? No, good. Nope. All right.
See ya.
No, it's too late now. You had your chance.
Whereas before, you'd go to the ready room, you debrief, and then you still hung out because you were at work together, right?
Yeah.
But at the airline, when you're done, you're done. Everybody disappears, like sometimes in seconds, because everybody's running to catch a flight home, or get the bus to the employee parking lot or whatever. It's like rats off a sinking ship. Everybody's gone in the blink of an eye. You're like, what the fuck just happened?
Yep, absolutely. So the other thing I was going to ask is, you have in here worst transition story. What were you thinking?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, so what I was referencing to was, doing the transition from, active duty military over to, civilian flying, specifically, for guys like this that went to the airlines. That transition can be pretty, depending on the airframe you're coming from. For you and I, the single seat, tactical version, it's monumental.
It was a fire hose effect.
It was a fire hose.
You were 6 weeks of trying to learn a large transport category airplane, all the rules of the airline, all the FARs you never gave a shit about before because you were single seat and those rules didn't apply to you.
Right. Yeah. And so, and then there's the operating in and out of airfields, airports, international airports.
Yeah.
Where it's crazy congested and the controllers talk wicked fast.
Yep. And,
we're used to.
Are you listening, India?
Right. Yeah, and maybe English is not the the primary.
Someone told me
language.
that's a matter of pride with Indian controllers. The faster they speak, they do that to show how fluent they are. It's like, oh, yeah, my ear doesn't listen that fast. You need to slow down. So,
Well,
yeah.
So we had a requirement we had to ride on the jump seat for two flights in the airplane that you were training in.
Okay.
Before you went and did your first trip on OE. OE stands for operational experience.
Right.
And what that means is, and this may be a shock to some of our listeners, but the very first time that an airline pilot flies the actual jet, there are passengers on board.
Oh, yeah.
Or revenue things on board.
Yeah. So
you have with you somebody that's qualified to be an instructor, so to speak, and the FAA calls them check airmen, which is what I do now. I'm a check airman on the 737, and so he's your instructor or she. And at a minimum, you have to have 25 hours with this check airman, and then have a check ride in the airplane administered by a check airman before you're safe to go solo and fly with
a non-check airman captain.
With a non-check airman,
yeah.
So I felt, and I don't remember his name, and it's probably because I was so traumatized, but my very first, trip on OE with this check airman, who was a former Navy guy. I think he flew P-3s in the Navy. That poor bastard was all by himself in that cockpit for about 3 days. I was so far behind. I was hanging on the rudder, literally trying to catch up.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? This is such a bad idea. I'm never going to get this. Because for instance, when you push off the gate in, say, Chicago O'Hare, you have to talk to one person. And then before you taxi, you got to talk to another person. And then when you're taxiing, you're talking to ground. And then, of course, you switch to tower for takeoff. Yeah. So that's 4 different people you're talking to.
Yeah.
When
you have your own company controller just to get off the gate.
Yes. Yeah. And then our previous life was, you talk to 2 tops. And when you were taxiing, you're probably the only guy taxiing or flight of 4 taxiing. If it was a busy day, there'd be other flights taxiing, but it was not crazy. Hell, you land in Chicago and you clear the runway and you don't stop. You keep moving or they'll shit all over you. And they're talking 100 miles an hour and you're expected to understand everything they're saying.
Or you better hold short of the inboard because they got traffic taken off. If there's, there's so many more things to keep track of and what's going on. It's a varsity world out there. It really is. And,
it is.
Yeah. So
it's
amazing
it's very
how
different.
Once you get it, it's like, oh, okay, this is not that big. You get it in your head what everyone's doing, which is what pisses me off about China and France. Are you listening? All right. English is the international language of aviation, but China and France are the worst too. They all speak French or Chinese, and you get no essay about who's where relative to you and what's going on, and just drives you nuts. And I think it's a huge safety issue that's going to have to be addressed at some point, but they seem intent on not addressing that. But interestingly, you made a comment and I went, oh, actually not true. In my case, at my company, if you had not flown a large transport category aircraft before, you went out and did touch and goes in your model airplane with no freight or passengers or anything on board, just a check airman and you and one other trainee first officer. You'd do several touch and goes and then swap seats, and he'd do several touch and goes. Yeah. So
can I
airlines ought to do that?
It's in the middle of the night and
it's a bright sunny afternoon. We would go down to Montgomery, Alabama, and Montgomery Air Base there. Yeah, nice and long, and they let us go down there and use their runway, and wow. Yeah, I did bounces in a DC-10 down there. And dude, I mean bounces. Because the other guy and I were both Marine pilots, and we're touching down at 400 or 500 feet per minute, no flare, You goddamn naval aviators, right?
So was that true for all fleets or that
Yes.
specific
Yeah,
fleet?
no, it
Because
was true
a
for all
bear?
fleets. If you had not flown a transport category aircraft before you went to OE, you had to go and do touch and goes in the airplane.
Is that still the same today?
I don't
Do you know?
I don't know. I don't. I wish. I hope it is, just because I think it's a really good practice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
I mean, that's really awesome.
All airlines ought to do it. Is it expensive? Yeah, but boy, does it! It gets.
And it's all about this when you get. And that's another thing. The training, the training when we went through, aircraft training before we flew in the military. It was a good pace, but it wasn't a fire hose.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times, and then some of the Air Force training I went through, it was really excruciatingly slow.
Right.
Like they
3 weeks of training all crammed into 4 months.
Yes. However, it's almost the opposite when you're at, because training is expensive.
Yes.
So, they'll take a guy like you and me 5 weeks later, you're getting your typewriter in the simulator, and then you're out the door to go fly the airplane.
I suspect that they aren't doing that anymore, though, because when I was learning to fly the DC-10, we had 727s DC-10 still then. The simulators in there on a good day were rough, and the visuals sucked. And so you really needed airplane experience. And now the full motion simulators with visuals that have satellite imagery are amazing. So I don't think you probably don't need it. Yeah, the fidelity is amazing. And so I would suspect they're not doing it for that cost, but they've sunk that cost into, $60 million simulators. So those things are what they're capable of is amazing. So, and then one other thing you had on here was about best advice for those considering going to the majors. And then I want to touch on Dizzy's question before we get out of here. But gas money, he puts it for the training is, I would say, if you're even thinking about going to the majors, go early, go often to keep your package in, keep it updated.
Why is that? Why go early?
Because every day is a seniority number, right?
Exactly. Let's talk about that. So seniority, you're probably going to hear this from any airline pilot you talk to. But why is it everything? Repeat. Why is seniority?
It's your lifestyle, right? If you're bidding last on your airplane, that means you get the crap schedules that nobody else wants, or somebody in front of you screwed up bidding,
right?
And so the more senior you are, the better schedules you can control and hold, and everything is based on your data hire. And the guy that was hired the day before you will always bid for his schedule before you bid for yours.
That's right.
And so every day is a number. Every day is important. And so you've got to get in there and keep your package updated. Be honest. Here's the other thing that if you're even a little bit dishonest on your package, don't think they won't find out. And when they do find out, you are now an ex-airline pilot. You're gone. They don't care. There's no room for fudging your records or anything in the airlines. They don't think it's even a little bit amusing. So
we could do an entire podcast on this.
Yeah.
I for 5 years was an interview captain. So I can talk about this a lot. The do's, the don'ts, the have tos and the maybes. But what Repeat said is so spot on. Listen, nobody cares if you failed a check ride or a stage check or whatever. Just be forthright about it. Because if you aren't, and then it comes up later, well, now you're a liar.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this. Though. Like, so a school like Embry-Riddle has a stage check, and then you ride with the FAA.
Yeah.
If you fail that stage check and had to redo it and then get signed off to go with the FAA, you don't consider that a failure, say, of your instrument check ride or your commercial check ride.
No. However, I have on the applicants that went to aviation schools where they did have those. Is that
any Part 141 school? Yeah,
141 schools, right? Yeah. That have stage checks along the way. Most of the time, if there was a stage check failure, they put it down, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, I don't really give two shits. I didn't even give a shit if somebody failed. For instance, I interviewed this guy one time, and before I interviewed, I'm looking at all this stuff. He failed, other than after his private pilot's license check ride. He failed every single check ride the first time.
Yeah.
And then was successful like the very next day.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, obviously this dude's got some check ride-itis.
Bingo.
And so when I got him in front of me and I knew he was worried about it, I just, ripped the Band-Aid right off and I said, looks to me like you have a little. And by the way, he was at a regional airline and he had no failures at the regional.
Yeah.
So he got over it. But I knew he was worried about it. So let's talk about it. And you know what? He totally owned everything, and that's really all I wanted to hear. Yep. I totally have check ride-itis. This is what I screwed up on this ride. This is what I screwed up on this ride. Went out the very next day, fixed it, blah, blah, blah. Not, well, the guy had it in for me and the airplane wasn't working right. And, all these excuses. No, just own it.
Bingo. No, that's great advice. It really is. And then don't get old. It's bad for your memory. How many months did they sponsor us last year?
CTI, FTI,
Yes,
FTI, Flight Training
Training.
International.
Yeah.
Gosh, it seemed like it forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Those guys are the ones to go see. They weren't around when I got interviewed for my airline, but what did I do? There was another guy around, a guy named Kit Darby. I don't know if he's still doing it or not, but yeah. So I bought Kit Darby's service about interview prep and all that sort of thing, and what they recommended, and I did. I spent $1,000 and went and rented 2 hours of United Airlines 747 simulator time with a guy who knew the profile for the airline I was going to interview with, and that was the best $1,000 I ever spent in my life. It got me through the interview. I'd never flown a 747. The heaviest thing I'd ever flown was a 36,000-pound Harrier with full load of fuel and bombs.
Right.
And boy, is that a different airplane to fly than a 747 empty. So that gave me the feel and the understanding of what it was going to be like. And so do the prep. Go spend the money and do the prep. You will never regret getting gouged up on what it feels like to fly the simulator, what they're looking for in an interview, and the things, we should do an episode on that. Don't wear a green polka dot suit to your interview. Okay, you're trying to stand out as an individual. Boy, you stood out all right.
Don't show up in a polo shirt and jeans.
Yeah,
for an airline interview.
Yeah,
or show up with a full beard and a man bun.
Yeah,
yes, that has happened.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
So,
it's like
anyway,
so talk about lack of situational awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Shit. So, all right. Well, and then the question Dizzy asked, and he's right, is the third rail, but we'll touch it. And I'm pretty sure you and I disagree on this, which is okay, which is a mandatory retirement age of 65.
You think you and I disagree on it?
I think we do.
Well, so are we talking about the mandatory retirement age is 65 or them raising it to possibly 67 now?
So
that's a thing.
They're talking about raising it to 67. And here's the thing that I against it when they were going to raise it from 60 to 65. Personally, because it was going to affect my lifestyle.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in my 60s and would have had to retire almost 4 years ago, I'm like, I'm in, relatively speaking, great shape. I am out on a medical, trying to get that fixed. Don't think it's going to happen, but I'm trying. If it does, great, and I'll be able to go back to work. If not, well, I tried. But there are guys who are perfectly healthy, in far better shape in their early 60s than some of these guys running around in their late 40s and early 50s. I mean, I remember walking up the stairs with a guy who was 59 years old, turning 60 that month, and he could barely make it to the top of the stairs. He had to sit down and rest after he got on the airplane at 59 years old. And I'm like, holy cow. He didn't need to be flying past 60. But there are guys out there who are perfectly capable. And so I think in that sense, I'd like to see it be a more of an individual thing. But I get it that guys don't want to be. So
how would you do that? How would you do that?
Well, I've had several friends who retired between age 60 and 65. They're like, I've met my pension requirements. I've got enough saved. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
But if you're healthy
what
enough, I'm okay with going to 67. Or
So here's what I was getting at. I was hoping that I could bait you, and you would say it. Right now, to get a Class 1 physical, it's depending on where you go and who your AME is. It's a formality, or it's a no shit physical. And for the most part,
absolutely,
guys,
a lot of guys go to doctors who go, "Here, can you fog this mirror?
Yes.
Try again. Okay, now you got it. Here's your first class." That's crap.
And so that's fine. If you're really concerned with your health, I would not use a flight physical as a precursor for am I okay? I would go get blood work and full
absolutely
thing done, which I do once a year anyway. However, if we're talking about raising the retirement age, and I completely agree with you, I've flown with guys that are 58 years old or 59 years old, and they seem like they're 80.
Yep.
Or at the same time, I've flown with 64-year-olds who I didn't even know were even older than 60 or even 55. Who are in great shape. Their mental acuity is there, and they're great pilots. So everybody's different. My point is, if we're going to just arbitrarily raise the age, we need to have some kind of, I don't want to call it a test, but some ability to measure where you are.
I've got no problem with increased scrutiny on cognitive ability and physical fitness and everything else from maybe age 50 on. I really don't.
I don't either.
So I think maybe we do agree then, because I've got no problem in that sense. I have no problem with if guys want to go to 70, but you better be able to mentally react and be in physically good shape. And for some people they can't do it, and others can. And I just think it's hard to penalize people who are otherwise healthy to force them into retirement. But
I agree. So we're in the same camp.
Okay.
My fear is this is going to be an arbitrarily moved number, and it's not going to have the effect that the people that are really backing this. I don't think it's going to have the effect they're hoping for.
No.
And so here's
it just slides the inevitable another 2 years if they do it the way they did it in 2007.
So let's hope for the best, because I'm a customer. We took a trip to Japan, so and I always go up and meet the crew, and everybody seems to be getting my age now, which is fine. Right now, I'm in, other than black eyes and a bruised ego, I'm in great shape. I want to make sure everybody else is too.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So it turns out we do agree on it then. Yeah, that's awesome. So, all right.
Didn't you have to take an annual real flight physical in the Marines? Yes.
Yeah. And you were in your 20s. And oh, by the way, you also had to pass a physical fitness test twice a year.
Yeah.
And that was no
legit.
slouch. Yeah, that was legit.
No, and the flight physicals in the military, they not only test your vision, they test your hearing, and they do blood work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real physical.
Gonna pass through the exam.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But when you go to get a first class physical for the FAA, like we talked about, depending on where you go, you can be in and out in 10 minutes. No hearing test.
Yeah.
A very quick vision test.
He's
pee in a
passed
cup.
now. He's passed now. My flight doc 25 years ago was an interesting guy. He was a Brit, and he'd been a POW in the Congo in the 60s. So I had no idea how old he's the guy. Again, he was like 78 years old. He looked like he might have been 50, 55. He had no idea. But he'd go, how many fingers am I holding up? 3. What number am I whispering? 43. I said, like the 4th or 5th time I'd been there, I go, Doc, have you ever said a number other than 43? Well, if I did, now half you chaps wouldn't be able to get it, would you? Okay. So, what a wonderful gentleman. And I don't mean to cast any asparagus on his memory, because he was a good doc and he would help you out if you got crossways with your physical needs in the FAA. But for young guys like me at the time, again, I'm in my 30s. He kind of rubber stamped. Can you see? Can you hear? Okay, good. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And that needs to not be the case. So anyway. Oh man.
What do you say we wrap this thing up?
I think we need to start talking about landing the airplane. So
it's an hour and a half into this thing.
I know, right?
Well, minus a 5-minute break.
Yeah. So we need to say thank you to all of the active duty and the veterans and the families that they have given so much and sacrificed so much so that they can be on active duty.
100%.
Right. Man. Thanks also to Dave Hamilton over at backbeatmedia.com, who handles our advertising for us. We've got another sponsor coming up again next week, I think, in Masterclass. And let's see who else. Thanks to Badass over at bdsaviationphotography.com.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Badass. And
Dizzy. I think Weiser's out there somewhere. I haven't seen any comments, but I think he might be listening as well. And yeah, let's see. Don't forget our merch store, sarahwas.us/merch. Go get yourself a cool hat, a cool shirt, a cool bikini, beach towel, drinking glasses, all manner of stuff.
It's becoming bikini season down in the lower part of the
southern hemisphere,
below the equator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's bikini season here in Kansas City today. It's going to be 88.
Oh, nice. All right. And then let's see. So there was that US/rate. Go give us a few stars, please. A few being 5 or more.
And share the show. Doesn't cost nothing.
That's the thing. If you could share the show with 2 people today, we would be ever so grateful. Let me turn that way down. Go share the show with 2 people. Tell them about the show. Tell them what you like. Don't tell them what you don't like. Make them listen. Hold them down for an hour and a half and make them listen to this crap coming out of our pie holes. And they're going to wind up liking it too and sharing it with other friends. And for those of you who are blessed enough to be able to crack your wallets open, lose sense of financial responsibility, and share your good fortune with us, we are ever so humbled and grateful. We don't even begin to know how to say thank you other than to say thank you. It means the world to us. Then one more thank you there. Any hints there, Faye? You listening?
That's the sound of the 2 Air Force F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound good. That's the Dos Gringos.
Both of them. Not one, but dos of the Gringos. Thank you, gents, for sharing your music with us and the wider world. 4 albums. Not a bad song in the bunch. So, until next week, don't be afraid to go around and don't sit on the ejection seat handle.
Don't sit on it.
There I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
Man, it's what?
He said it's over.
Stupid risks are what make life worth living.
Yeah, we're out.